What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, February 7th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 6-game NBA slate again tonight. Nice sized Friday slate. A lot of moving parts. Obviously, teams with new additions. In a lot of cases, those guys are not playing yet, so we have shorthanded teams. We do still have some Q tags, of course, that we're waiting on as well. Going to dive into all of that, going game by game, talking about this slate for DraftKings, looking at what I'd be playing in large field tournaments if the slate started right now. Obviously, take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt because it will change between now and lock, as will ownership. But going to dive into all of that. Not going to say anything crazy like that Kyrie Irving is better than LeBron James because I'm not an idiot. But going to get into this slate. As always, if you have questions, throw them in chat. I will answer them as I see them if I have an answer. Hit the thumbs up button. That helps out quite a bit. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Trying to do more content, more shows lately. So those notifications will help you out knowing what my schedule looks like for the day. So going to dive into it here, starting with the Spurs at Charlotte. Spurs are one of the cleaner teams on the slate. They already had their big addition. De'Aaron Fox played last game, played 37 minutes, didn't miss a beat coming over from the Kings, played really, really well. Now they're taking on Charlotte. This game does have, I think, a 10-point spread, give or take. People mentioning Vanderbilt in chat. Yeah, glad he worked out. I played 3 max yesterday. I ended up not getting to him. I played large field on the night slate, was way over the field there. Still didn't win anything, but glad that hopefully some of you guys made money with him. Certainly a big game from him. For the Spurs, though, nothing that is really standing out to me right now. For the field, De'Aaron Fox and Wemby are projected to get ownership, and that is perfectly fine. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with either of those guys. They're both very high upside plays here, taking on the Hornets in Charlotte. Good matchup, great players. I think that the reason I'm not getting to them probably just has to do with opportunity cost at the position. Just has to do with me, looking elsewhere. I haven't actually looked at my player exposures yet, so I will figure out why I'm not getting to them as we go through the show. But this is a perfect example of one. I could easily have these guys by lock. Like, there's not an actual reason that I wouldn't want to get to Fox or I wouldn't want to get to Wemby. There's no, I think the field's wrong on these guys or anything like that. They just didn't show up in the lineups that I made before the show for whatever reason. But they both look pretty good. Wemby has gotten relatively expensive at $11K. Fox's salary did jump up a bit from the other day from $8K to $8,500, but good spot for both guys. They certainly both look good here. No real ownership coming into the rest of this team. Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan getting a little bit, but I think that Wemby and Fox pretty clearly should be the guys that you're looking to the most from this team. On the other side for Charlotte, this one is still completely up in the air. I haven't even attempted to hone in my projections on Charlotte yet because it's the first game of the slate. So we will have an updated injury report before the slate starts. But right now there is just so much up in the air for the Hornets. LaMelo Ball is questionable. He had missed, the last few games. He's questionable to return. Josh Green is doubtful, so he is most likely not playing. But then you also have Dalton Knecht and Yusuf Nurkic, both questionable with their trades pending. So, if those guys are available, I assume they're playing. Dalton Knecht, I would feel pretty confident is playing if he's available. I assume Yusuf Nurkic is going to be in the center rotation. Obviously he got phased out in Phoenix, didn't exactly get along with Budenholzer, or I don't know if that's the right phrase, because to not get along with somebody, you'd have to actually talk to them usually, but obviously wasn't in favor in Phoenix. I assume that he gets minutes for Charlotte, but this is really up in the air. If LaMelo does play, remains to be seen what sort of minutes limit he is on. He's 10-1. It's going to be tough to want to get to much of him. He's showing up for me here, but I think that I would end up coming down a little bit on the minutes total here. If you go to him, it's kind of similar to going to Embiid the other day, which, obviously worked out great for people that did it. It's basically saying well, what if he just plays more than everybody's assuming he's going to play? He's really low owned. It's a 6-game slate. It's LaMelo Ball. The upside's really, really high. That would be the thought process in getting to him in larger field tournaments. On the one hand, it is, especially on a 6-game slate, it's just always going to be difficult to get somebody that realistically can be a top 3 or 4 raw point scorer on a slate at low ownership. So that would be why you take a shot on LaMelo. But the most likely case is that, he's at least relatively limited here and isn't going to look that great. If he's out, this team, like if LaMelo's out and Connect's out and Nurkic is out, this team ends up being pretty shorthanded. They traded Micic. They don't have him. You would probably be going back to like KJ Simpson here if LaMelo is out for some value. Simpson coming in at 4,300 still, so he's cheap. Josh Green being out opens up minutes. Salon is back, so he'll soak up some of those minutes. Nick Smith at 5,100 is going to look better if LaMelo's out. There's just more usage to go around there. At the center position, if Nurkic ends up not playing, you have $4,300 Diabate. I assume that you would get the rotation that we've seen recently in the games that Mark Williams hasn't played, where Diabate comes off the bench, but plays more minutes than Taj Gibson. So he would end up looking like a decent value. There's just a lot of moving parts here to the point where it's really difficult to talk about because it's not just injury stuff and it's different pieces where, if Connect is out and Nurkic is out, but LaMelo's in, then like Diabate is going to look fine, but it's not going to make KJ Simpson look as good as he would be if LaMelo's out and those other guys are in. So fortunately, this is a 7 p.m. game. Miles Bridges, one way or the other at 9K, I think is going to be a little bit overpriced for his median, but does give you a ceiling, and he will look better if LaMelo's out. Again, I talked about it the other day, but you can see increased playmaking upside. You're going to have the ball in his hands more in general, can lead to more usage as well with no LaMelo, with no Brandon Miller, now with no Micic either. So Miles Bridges, if LaMelo's out, does look a little bit better as a way to pay up to be contrarian. Also, Cleveland taking on Washington in a game that is probably going to be an absolute dumpster fire. Washington is a 17-point dog at home. Washington at best has 10 players today. At worst, they have 7, which would mean that they have to list an inactive player or a player that is not going to play as active just to play the game. So the injury news in this game is going to be huge. It's going to change the entire slate on the Washington side because obviously it's a shitty matchup for Washington going against Cleveland. But if they end up with 7 healthy players, you're just in that situation where these guys are going to play so many minutes on the Washington side that it opens up value and makes them look good just based on playing time. To clarify, I guess what I'm referring to, because of trades and everything, Washington right now has 10 players that have not been ruled out on their roster, but 3 of them, Malcolm Brogdon, Justin Champagnie, and Rashawn Holmes, are all questionable. So the Washington side here has the potential to just be peak like March, April NBA. But on the Cleveland side, I think it's really interesting because you're not getting a ton of ownership coming into this team outside of a couple of spots, but it's a team that I think looks really good for a couple of different reasons. Ty Jerome showing up the most for me here, 36% for me, 28% for the field. He's 4,700. I like Ty Jerome a ton. And the reason is that he kind of has to get minutes no matter what. So the biggest risk for Cleveland here for their main guys, their main rotation pieces, of course, is that they just play 3 quarters and they're done because Washington is losing by 30 after 3. And you end up getting, the type of game where like, maybe Garland was off to a good start or maybe Mitchell was off to a good start, but they just don't get to add on because they don't play down the stretch. Cleveland has 10 active players. So the thing you want to do in that case is look and say, okay, well, who would be playing garbage time here? It's not Donovan Mitchell. It's not Darius Garland. It's not Evan Mobley. It's not Jarrett Allen. And it is most likely not Max Strus. So that leaves you Ty Jerome, Craig Porter, Jalen Tyson, Amani Bates, and Tristan Thompson. The one of those guys that definitely has a big role here, even if this game is competitive, is Ty Jerome. No Karis LeVert, no Sam Merrill. So no George Niang. So there's a very clear 6th-man role for Ty Jerome here anyway. And then if this game blows out, he's going to be on the floor because he's beyond, he's behind Mitchell and Garland, obviously, in the pecking order of who gets to not play garbage time. So Ty Jerome, one way or the other, should play a bunch of minutes here. I think he looks really, really good. It's an example of, a lot of times when you see games with big spreads, people will ask, well, who's on the floor in garbage time? And usually that's not a great way of thinking about it because you're talking about end of the bench guys that even if they get, a full 12-minute fourth quarter, that probably gives them like 12 minutes for the game. And you're not playing guys that you think might play 12 minutes. But in Ty Jerome's case, it's huge because it really just solidifies his floor, knowing that if this game is somehow competitive, he is probably playing like 24, 25 minutes anyway. And if this game blows out, he's playing all of garbage time, I would assume. So Ty Jerome just looks great to me at 4,700. Jared Allen here getting 10% ownership, 6,400. I think he looks good. Showed up, came out with a 30-minute projection in my model, even factoring in the spread here. That's probably, it feels a little high to me. Like I might end up walking that back a minute or so, but I still think that, projecting Allen for 29, 30 minutes, somewhere in there, projecting Mitchell and Garland for around 30 minutes makes sense here. And it is a spot where Allen should just dominate for whatever minutes he is on the floor. It's just a matter of, does he have to play at all in the fourth quarter or not? But the fact that he's not getting much ownership here makes him look pretty good to me. Max Strus at 4,500, shooting guard, small forward eligible. He's cheap enough where, just playing 27, 28 minutes in this matchup is going to make him look pretty good. Now, keep in mind that he is somebody that is likely to fall off as more value opens up. And same to some extent here for Jared Allen. Like if Diabate ends up looking better, Jared Allen will look relatively worse. If KJ Simpson at 4,300 ends up being the starting point guard for the Hornets, you're not going to need as much $4,500 Max Strus, for example. So these guys could certainly fall off a bit. Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, clearly fine with whatever I get to there. Again, likely they don't play maximum minutes here, but also likely that they produce at an above average pace against Washington. People tend to do that. Jalen Tyson, 3K flat, also going to get garbage time, pretty much no doubt about it. Should be in the rotation as well. I have him in for 19 minutes right now. I think I could probably get that up to like 20. So I think he's, a reasonable value option. I'm not getting to like Imani Bates, Craig Porter, Tristan Thompson right now. I think if I were to go to one of them, it probably would be Porter. Like there is some non-zero chance that Craig Porter is actually ahead of Jalen Tyson in the rotation, for example, and maybe Porter plays like 21, 22 minutes. That's not what I necessarily think happens, but it is possible with LeVert and Merrill being traded / out. So of the Cleveland pieces I'm not getting to right now, I do think Craig Porter would be like the most interesting one, but mostly I love Ty Jerome here. I don't think there's a lot that can really happen on this slate to where I don't want to play Ty Jerome. And then the rest of Cleveland, it's kind of just whatever pieces I get to, great. You kind of just have like two full teams to consider here with Cleveland, since we basically know who's getting garbage time run in a good spot, if there is garbage time. And you have starters in a great matchup where if there's not garbage time, they are probably going to have huge games. On the Washington side, like I said before, this one already looks very good because they're so shorthanded, and it has the potential to look even better. Right now, I have all the questionable guys projected in. So I have Malcolm Brogdon projected to play like 21 and a half minutes off the bench. I have Rashawn Holmes projected to start and play 25 and a half minutes. I have Champagnie projected to play like 18 minutes off the bench. So that makes Washington look not as good as if they're out, but they still obviously look good. We saw Bub Carrington move into the starting lineup with Kuzma gone last game. He is still $3,300. He typically plays a lot of minutes when he starts, and there's no reason to think he wouldn't play a lot of minutes here. Also, he is almost definitely playing garbage time. So you get the situation with him, you get it with Keyshawn George, where they should be pretty much blowout proof here. If this game's competitive, they're playing a lot of minutes. If this game's not competitive, they're playing a lot of minutes. So they lose some of that minutes risk that you generally get from starters. They obviously still have the risk of they could just go out there and play like shit because they are developing rookies playing against the Cavs. But they are cheap. George coming in at 3,800. I like getting to both of them a lot. Jordan Poole at 6,800 is, the range of outcomes for him is crazy, which makes him appealing in your large field tournaments. He's only 6,800. He doesn't have to share the ball with Kyle Kuzma. He's going up against a Cleveland team that is going to make life difficult for him. He's probably not going to be efficient, but he's going to shoot a lot. And if this game is competitive, it probably has to do with Jordan Poole. Like there's not a whole lot else going on for Washington. I am interested to see how much Cleveland I'm getting to. So I do like this, that like 35% of my pool lineups have Strus, 30% have Allen, Mobley's in 15%, Garland and Mitchell are each in 10%. Because if Jordan Poole does do well, like if you know ahead of time Jordan Poole scores 45 DraftKings points, your projection on Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen just goes up, because instead of projecting them for 30 minutes, you're projecting them for 32, 33 at that point. So I do like the idea in general of, if you have Jordan Poole in lineups, getting to more Cleveland. 26% of my Jordan Poole lineups have at least two guys from the Cavs, 2% have three, 28% have one. Like I would honestly like that to be higher. But one way or the other, Jordan Poole does certainly have upside here, but it is a shitty spot. The ownership is relatively low. Oh, I think I checked off. Okay, yeah. So 35% of my lineups have at least somebody from Cleveland. 30% have two guys from Cleveland. 5% have three guys. So Poole, it's just, the typical Jordan Poole play, but obviously a bad spot. It's not saying I think he does well. It's just at 15% at 6,800. Like if he does well, you're in a really good spot. But he also probably drops off a bit as, we get some more news and some other things become bigger priorities. Richaun Holmes, if he is starting, is $3,500. He is probably going to get his ass kicked, but there's not a lot Washington can do about it. Like there's no, Richaun Holmes is getting beat like a drum, let's go to Tristan Vukcevic or Anthony Gill. Like there's no clear upgrade to Richaun Holmes. You're just going to have to eat it. And he actually, going back to last season, has averaged 27 minutes per game as a starter. He played like 26 and a half minutes last game, wasn't even in the closing lineup during garbage time. So the minutes should be there. He's only 3,500. I think right now he looks like a good value. If he's out, I don't know what Washington will do. They might start Vukcevic and just let him get torched for 30 minutes. Welcome to the NBA. Or maybe they go to Anthony Gill and, just play smaller and give Vukcevic minutes off the bench. But either way, I think Vukcevic is going to look like a good value at 3K, getting 28% ownership right now. And he's another one where it's really difficult to envision how he's not playing a lot of minutes, even if Holmes is in. If Holmes is out, then like obviously he's playing a lot, but if even with Holmes in, it is difficult to figure out how Vukcevic doesn't play a lot of minutes. Like the only real answer would be that they use Anthony Gill as the backup center, but there's nothing lately to suggest or ever to suggest they're going to do that. So the assumption here is that Vukcevic is the backup center if Holmes is starting. Vukcevic is also playing garbage time, and if Holmes is out, then obviously you're expecting to play Vukcevic a lot. Shot Like Harden said, did Toronto re-sign Orlando Robinson? No, they didn't. So yeah, Vukcevic is going to look good. Koulibaly coming off the triple-double, 5,500, 21% ownership. He's similar to me to Jordan Poole, except he is cheaper and does have better positional eligibility. He's likely to play a lot of minutes if this game's competitive. He is not likely to be on the floor in garbage time or anything, so the minutes are risky. LaMelo did go through shoot around, hadn't seen that. Patrick Baldwin waived by the Spurs, does not matter. So Koulibaly, I think he is fine. I don't love 21% ownership, but he is still showing up 14% for me. Malcolm Brogdon, 4,900, just kind of a last piece in, probably, mostly goes away. Also would be kind of surprised if he plays. He was a late addition to the injury report. It is Malcolm Brogdon. Those two things combined make me think he probably isn't playing, but have him in for right now. And then Kispert and Champagnie. Kispert, if this game's competitive, should play a lot of minutes as essentially the sixth man here for Washington. I have him in for 26 minutes. If this game actually were competitive through the fourth quarter, he's probably playing 29, 30. Not a great point per minute guy, though. I think you can just find, for the most part, better value here. And then the same goes for Champagnie. The caveat here, though, is if you were to get, like at least two of Holmes, well, obviously if Champagnie gets ruled out, then you're not playing Champagnie. But if you were to get like two of these guys ruled out, Kispert is going to project better because he's just going to have to play a lot of minutes kind of regardless. If like Brogdon and Holmes are out, Champagnie is probably playing a lot regardless at 3,100. So there is Arcathelza said I had it backward. I hadn't looked at the injury report yet. So Brogdon was an upgrade, so makes it more likely he is playing. So I will say, and I mentioned it earlier, but keep this in mind, that if Holmes and Champagny are to end up getting ruled out, they had to upgrade Brogdon and just say that he is active. So there is, I would be a little bit nervous if you get Brogdon available, Champagny, Holmes out. Not to say that means he's not going to play, but there's a real chance if that is how the news breaks that Washington has 7 guys today. So yeah, just depending how this news breaks, there could be a lot of minutes available here. The last thing I'll say is kind of, I guess it's useful to kind of have an idea in your head of like the pecking order for garbage time here. Since, we could get into a situation where they have 7 or 8 guys. Jordan Poole obviously is the last guy I would expect to play garbage time. Koulibaly is Holmes is the second to last guy that I would expect to play garbage time because he has Vucevic directly behind him. Koulibaly would be the third, I think. Probably between Koulibaly and Kispert. Third least likely guy to play garbage time, then the other one. Champagny, Vucevic, Anthony Gill are undoubtedly playing garbage time, and then I would assume that you have Carrington and Keyshawn George as the other two. So the only one of them that is questionable is Champagny. If he's out, then I would assume you end up with one of Koulibaly or Kispert, because it's not going to be Brogdon, I wouldn't think. So absolute mess of a team, but fortunately 7:00 game, so this will all get cleared up before lock. Moving on to Miami, which is a lot easier to talk about because they pretty much look exactly like they have in recent games. They traded Jimmy Butler, but he wasn't playing anyway. They got Andrew Wiggins. They got some other pieces. Those guys aren't playing either. So pretty much status quo for Miami. And right now I'm getting to Khalil Ware at 6K, not getting any ownership. He only played like 19 minutes last game, but I'm not reading into that at all. He picked up 3 fouls or 2 fouls. He was in foul trouble in the first half, whether it was 2 or 3. And then you just kind of had weird Miami rotations where the second unit played or not even second unit, just the unit that was on the floor to start the fourth quarter essentially played the entire fourth quarter, with Larson, Rozier playing the entire quarter. Bam played the entire quarter. Jovic played the entire quarter. And then Tyler Hero subbed in halfway through. So you just got a weird rotation there in general from Miami. We've seen Ware average around 31 minutes as a starter this year. 6K, weak Brooklyn interior. I really like him if he's going to be 4% owned. I think he's a good way to be different in tournaments. You're not sacrificing upside. He's cheap, relatively cheap. So I like getting there. I'm fine getting to Jovic here at 5,200. He's been playing massive minutes off the bench. I didn't project him to play another 35 or 36 like he has been, but even at 30 minutes, he's showing up for me, and obviously he's live to play more. Bam with power forward eligibility at 8,200 against this front court looks pretty good. He's not showing up for me quite as much as the field, but wouldn't be upset if, more value opens up and I do start getting to some more Bam. I do think that he looks good. Terry Rozier is getting some ownership here. Tyler Hero is getting some ownership. I don't have any issues with those guys. They're just not in lineups for me right now. But they're in that like De'Aaron Fox, Wemby mold. Obviously, very different plays where Tyler Hero is actually good and somebody that you're happy to see in your lineup, and Terry Rozier is not good and somebody that you're better off just not sweating this game and hoping that Terry Rozier actually plays well. But he is 4,500. He's likely to play upper 20s in minutes here. On the other side for Brooklyn, no Ben Simmons as they work on buying him out. Nothing for the Nets is showing up for me. This team just plays really flat minutes. They're tough to get to. The matchup against Miami is not great. They have a 103 total, which is the lowest on the board by several points. If you're getting to a little bit of Keon Johnson, Nick Claxton, Cameron Johnson, D'Angelo Russell, whatever, to be different, like it's fine. But they're not shorthanded enough that any of these guys have to play big minutes. They clearly, from a tendency standpoint, don't look to play these guys big minutes, particularly the guys like Russell and Cam Johnson that you would want to play big minutes. So mostly uninterested in Brooklyn. Before we get into the other three, a reminder, a couple more days before I can stop pointing this out, but the showdown tool at Run the Sims is free for the Super Bowl. Highly recommend checking that out. You do not have to pay for it. You can get full access to it. It's a really useful tool for a lot of reasons. Probably should have remembered to sign in to the site before I did this, but really useful tool for, obviously a lot of reasons. You can go in here. One thing I really like, if it loads, I guess I should pick the slate, is that you can easily change inputs here, and it'll directly change the projections for you. So it's like having your own projection model that you did not have to do all the work to build. You do not have to maintain, but you can do better than just saying, well, this guy's projected for 18 and I think he should be projected for 20. You can actually say, well, he's being projected for X number of targets and I think it should be more. And you can, fix that in here. Steve Stan asked if you can use it from your phone. I honestly don't know the answer. I would guess that it's no, but I don't know. Check it out. I've never tried to use an optimizer or sim from my phone, so I'm never the right person to ask that. And you're the first person to ask since we bought it, so I actually don't know the answer. But yes, you can change all the inputs here, but also for Showdown, like really useful to be able to map out different game scenarios. And again, instead of like having to use your brain and be like, well, if the Chiefs win by 21, then this probably happened. You can just put in Chiefs win by 21, run your sims, and see what it gives you and make decisions using that. So you get, all the information, you have all the flexibility, all the setting flexibilities that you would want, predicts dupes for you after you run your sim. So really, really great product. Excited to have bought it, excited to work on it and improve it for next NFL season. I say that as if I'm going to be the one doing it and not Nerdy Tenor, but excited for us to work on it and improve it. So check it out for now. Already a really good product for Showdown, and use it. It's free for the Super Bowl. If you want to sign up early, getting access for our NFL product for next year, you can do so. Use the promo code ENDGAME. You get 10% off, not only for this season, but you will be locked in for life. So down the road, if we do end up adding other stuff, that causes us to raise the price in the future, you are still locked in, getting your 10% off the 2024 season price. So check that out. Highly recommend using this for the Super Bowl at the very least. It is free to you. Now getting back to the NBA slate. 3 more games. Milwaukee taking on Atlanta here. Q tags for Milwaukee on Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kyle Kuzma, and Pat Connaughton. Obviously, some of those more important than the others. Right now, I have the questionable guys projected in. And so I'm getting to a ton of Giannis, as is the field. The power forward eligibility here at 11.8 just makes him look really, really useful. You don't have the same opportunity cost that you do for Wemby. I saw somebody mention earlier, too, that if Giannis gets ruled out, Wemby does look better, just because you'll have that salary available. But right now, Giannis looks great to me. Kyle Kuzma looks fine at 6,100. I think if this were a bigger slate, I wouldn't be that interested in Kuzma, but he is relatively inexpensive. And assuming he's starting, I assume he's just playing, 28 to 30 minutes. Obviously remains to be seen how he ends up fitting in as far as usage goes. Giannis and Dame obviously are going to be priorities ahead of him, but he should get better looks than he's getting with, was getting with Washington. I expect his efficiency to come up with Milwaukee. So there's obviously a wide range of outcomes here, but he's cheap enough and in a good enough matchup that I do think he looks fine. Getting to Dame looks pretty good here as well. Those would be the 3 priorities for me. If you get to some Bobby Portis, I think that's okay. Not really getting to anything else. Optimal Prime asked if we have a similar tool for NBA. No, and we won't, at least for the foreseeable future. So our game plan over there is basically not, at least right now, to be a one-stop shop like some of the sites that already exist where you can just go there for every sport, because we don't have the manpower. It's 4 of us, and that's not going to happen. We're not looking, at least right now, to build a massive company either. So our game plan is more to focus on the things that we are confident we can improve, things that we think we can make the best in the industry, and have those tools available, as opposed to spreading ourselves super thin and just putting out a bunch of stuff that is kind of half-baked and not great. But NBA just being such a massive time sink is something that at the very least won't be available in the current version of the company. I can feel pretty comfortable saying. But yeah, NFL, huge priority, obviously. We'll probably also, we have some other stuff in the works, but NBA not being one of them. My projections are available right now at Endgame, as they have been. Ideally, we get that ported over to Run the Sims, but I'm not sure that will happen soon or this season. I would like next season to at least have those available on the site. On the Atlanta side, Q tags here on all of the pieces that they just acquired. So Q tags on Karis LeVert, Terrence Mann, George Niang. Trae Young is probable. Moge is available. Plowden is available. Those guys up from the G League. Still no Clint Capella, no Jalen Johnson. Bones Highland is out for sure. David Roddy also out. So my guess right now, I projected the questionable guys out here just because I did. I'm kind of just assuming that those guys aren't available yet. But if they're out, the Hawks look pretty good as far as the starting lineup goes, at least. Trae Young showing up 38% for me, 34% for the field, 9,600 is a solid price tag there. Very likely that he picks up an extra minute or two just because of how shorthanded they are. No DeAndre Hunter, no Bogdan Bogdanovic, obviously no Jalen Johnson. So you just are in a situation now where you don't really have quality players to soak these minutes up. Like when Jalen Johnson and Bogdan were out, you could still, give minutes to DeAndre Hunter, play him 30 minutes or so. There's nobody that can really backfill the DeAndre Hunter minutes. So I do think it's likely you see a little bit more playing time for Trae Young, a little bit more playing time for Dyson Daniels, for example. So I'm happy to get to both of those guys. I'm a little bit surprised how much Okongwu is showing up for me here at 6,300. I have him basically projected the same way as I have been. He played 30 and a half minutes last game, but as a reminder, he was playing out of his mind and earned those minutes. I'm not looking at it necessarily as he just plays 30 and a half minutes a game now. I still have him projected between 28 and 29, but he does certainly have a ceiling here. I don't mind that I'm getting to him. Risa Shea is an interesting one to me at 4,500. I think that, again, he probably goes down a bit once other value opens up. But I have his minutes projected relatively aggressively here. I had mentioned it on previous shows that without Jalen Johnson and without Bogdan Bogdanovic, you at the very least get more minutes upside for Risa Shea because there is the potential for him to close. Now you take DeAndre Hunter out as well, and you think about what this closing lineup looks like in a competitive game. It's Trae Young, it's Onyeka Okongwu, it's Dyson Daniels, and then there's two spots open because you don't have any other guaranteed closer. So it's basically two spots for, Vit Krejci, who I assume closes, but doesn't have to. Krejci, Risa Shea, Garrison Matthews, Barlow, Gay. I think there's a pretty good chance, especially if he's playing remotely well, that Risa Shea ends up closing this game. So I do like him at low ownership if everything holds the way it is right now. But again, if you get Washington ruling guys out, you get Charlotte ruling guys out, you get other teams ruling guys out, then I do become less interested in Risa Shea. Dominic Barlow, I projected to be the spot starter. He's a 3K power forward. I gave him 18 minutes. He played 13 in his last spot start, but they are more shorthanded than they were. We had seen Gay playing, like 20, 21 minutes in his spot starts. If you land on a little bit of Barlow, I think it's fine, but I'm not going crazy there. Krejci not showing up for me even in 25 minutes. I think, again, that he probably does play mid to upper 20s, but not a great point per minute guy. Stephen Leibowitz said LeVert and Niang are in Atlanta, Hunter with Cavs. I think I saw Hunter's not playing, so I assume all physical's not done. Yeah, I'm not sure. Hunter is confirmed not playing. The Atlanta pieces are listed as questionable as of the 4:30 injury report. So I know they're there. They have their uniform numbers and everything. I don't know their statuses. Atlanta's beat writers, last I saw, said that it's all just still up in the air. So we'll have to wait and see. If those guys are in, then everything I said about Risa Shea becomes less true. You have LeVert playing minutes, you have Niang playing minutes, you have basically a fully functioning team. And I would, walk a minute or so back from Young. I would walk a minute or so back from Daniels. I would cut a couple minutes off of Risa Shea. The team as a whole just looks less appealing if those guys are available. Philadelphia taking on Detroit. Joel Embiid getting 39% ownership. I'm at 38%. I think he looks very good. Nobody else on this team is getting any ownership whatsoever. If you were to go anywhere else, I think it's Paul George and Tyrese Maxey. Maxey clearly still has a ceiling, even with George and Embiid active. You saw 63 DraftKings points or whatever it was last game. He can still do it. He's still going to play big minutes, but clearly his salary is higher than it should be for his current projection now that he's playing with George and with Embiid, because his salary right now is very heavily a function of what he was doing without Paul George and without Joel Embiid. So very tough to get to him. It's tough to get to Paul George. We know that his production has been massively worse with Joel Embiid in this season than with him out. The only thing I could say for Paul George here that would make me want to roster him is that I had a very, very, very good Paul George team the other day when he was 1% owned and played like absolute garbage even without Embiid. So there's, at least a 50% chance he scores 60 real points tonight. But that aside, tough to get to anything here outside of Embiid. For Embiid, he played 36 minutes last game. He was on a 30-minute restriction. Coaches are liars. I didn't give him 36 minutes today, but I did go to 33 and a half because I'm not going to just project him for 30 after seeing him play 36 last game. The spread in this game is close, and that stands out even more on a slate like this, where you have a 10-point spread in Charlotte, you have a 17-point spread in Washington, you have a 19-point spread in OKC. Not that there's anything guaranteed. We see all the time 19-point spreads end up being close, 4-point spreads end up being 30-point wins, but it really does stand out on this slate when you're projecting minutes that there's only a couple of games that are likely to be close. So Embiid looks really good here. 10K, perfectly fine price tag. I'm not sure off the top of my head what he is on FanDuel. I know he was 8,400 the other day, but goes without saying, if he's even cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, he looks really good there too. For Detroit, Cade Cunningham is questionable, so something on their injury report that certainly matters a ton. Assuming that he plays, we're pretty much getting status quo for what we've had in recent games with Jaden Ivey out. Tobias Harris is probable. Malik Beasley is probable. Dennis Schroeder is out. Lindy Waters is out. So status quo, basically, if Cade Cunningham is in. Cunningham is the only guy getting double-digit ownership here at 10.5. Whatever Cade you can get to, great. The more value that opens up, the easier he's going to be to get to, goes without saying. Asar Thompson, 4,500, showing up 5 to 10% for me, 5 to 10% for the field. One thing I will mention for Thompson, he has played 25 and 27 minutes in his last two games. I'm cautious to just say he's not on a minutes restriction. The Pistons are letting him go free. Because, we've seen other games this year where he plays 30 minutes and then follows it up with 21, but that is back-to-back games now where he has, kind of slowly ramped up the playing time. It did let me give him an extra minute or so on my projection. I got him up to 24 and a half. So that is, seemingly him trending in the right direction, but still, a secondary option here. Jalen Duren, Tobias Harris, if you land on them, fine. I don't think that there's like a massive difference necessarily between Duren and like Onyeka Okongwu, at least in my head. But obviously when I run my stuff, I'm getting a lot more Okongwu for whatever reason, probably, or maybe just game environment in general. But if you want to go to 6% Duren, that's fine. Jake asked how many lineups are Giannis plus Embiid. %26 of my Embiid lineups have Giannis. I don't know why 52% have Kuzma. I guess he just randomly fits in really nicely price-wise there, but that's interesting. So Detroit, I think basically just a secondary team across the board looking at their starters. And then finally wrapping things up with what should be an abomination of a game on par with Cleveland and Washington, but at least Washington is at home. Toronto taking on OKC. For the Raptors, no RJ Barrett, no Brandon Ingram, no Jakob Poeltl. James Wiseman's already been waived. PJ Tucker is probably on an island somewhere. A couple G League guys are out. Emmanuel Quickley is back. So you have Emmanuel Quickley. You have Scotty Barnes as, the adults in the room. But this is going to be ugly. Very similar to the Washington spot. I am going to feel better about going to young guys on the Raptors here because they'll probably play garbage time. They'll probably play their regular minutes if it somehow is competitive. Jonathan Mogbo is my guess at who starts in place of Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk, who is on the Pelicans now. Doesn't have to be, but as mentioned earlier, they have not re-signed Orlando Robinson as of last I saw. You don't have Olynyk, you don't have Poeltl. Mogbo has been in the rotation recently since coming back from the G League, so I assume he's getting the start. He is 3,100, and maybe most importantly, he is power forward eligible. So he is just going to look like a good value here. Chris Boucher is going to look like a good value here as well at 3,400, also power forward eligible. You just have a very thin front court now with the current makeup of this team. You also don't have Bruce Brown, so that's another one of the bench pieces that had been soaking up 20, 21 minutes. You don't have Davion Mitchell, who, when quickly is active, generally wasn't playing anyway, but it's not like he's going to step in and play. You have a pretty shorthanded Raptors team here. I haven't actually counted how many players they have. I guess I should do that. But one way or the other, it is a shorthanded team. So Boucher is going to look good at 3,400. Mogbo looks good. Then you get into, the actual players. Scotty Barnes, 12%. As a tournament play, fine. Like, he's a good player. The matchup is obviously garbage. He's probably not going to be playing as many minutes as you would like, given that they should just get cooked by OKC. But he's 4% owned. And it kind of just goes back to what I was saying about LaMelo earlier, where there is some appeal in a tournament where you have to beat 32,000 entries to get $100,000, and that's 33% of the prize pool, to just saying, like, okay, I'm going to play the really good player that is 4% owned and hope that somehow the game stays close, especially because if the game does stay close, it's probably because he's having a great game. But, not anything I want to have a ton of money invested in. Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter both look fine at their respective salaries. Not the best point per minute guys, but they should play a bunch of minutes. I'm assuming that they both start. The Raptors roster right now has, so we have Grady Dick, Jonathan Mogbo, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, Jacoby Walter, Garrett Temple, Chris Boucher, Jamal Shed, Agbaji, and Battle. So they have 10 active players today. So they're not super shorthanded, but they're shorthanded enough that the value, the young, cheap pieces that, or in Boucher's case, not young, but the cheap pieces that are likely to start or get a lot of playing time anyway, the playing time is pretty secure for them. I'm not getting to Shed right now at 3,500, but I think he's also playable. I expect him to play mid-20s in minutes as well. If you want to roll the dice on some like Baji, I don't think that's crazy either at low ownership. But Mogbo and Boucher look like the priorities here for me from Toronto. I don't think a whole lot would change that. And then on the OKC side, Chet Holmgren is back. That makes most of this team very unappealing because he's going to just, even though I assume he's not a full go yet, have him projected for like 18 to 19 minutes. He's going to cut into production when he's on the floor. He's going to cut into minutes for some of these guys. You have, a team that's been shorthanded in general lately. That is a lot less shorthanded now. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 10-7, getting 12% ownership, I don't mind that. I would expect to get a little bit more the more value that you get. Clearly, they are likely to beat the shit out of Toronto, and you don't get fourth quarter minutes from Shai, but he also is pretty likely to have, 55 fantasy points by the fourth quarter. So he looks good enough. I still think Giannis is the bigger priority in the game with a closer spread. I think that, I think Embiid's a bigger priority, but obviously getting to Shai on this slate, like, you just need raw points somewhere, especially as value starts opening up elsewhere. Same goes for Jalen Williams here at 8K. Not a priority, but somebody that I think is fine, especially as value opens. Other than that, I don't really see much of anything from OKC. So that wraps this one up. 6 games, a lot of moving parts. Again, you can get access to my projections using the links in the description below. Either sign up for Endgame. They are included there. They're posted in Discord every day. Or if you just want the projections, you can sign up using the Dub Club projections link in the description below as well. Obviously, my takes on everything, all the news we're waiting on right now, will be updated in there as I update my own projections. It goes straight into that sheet. So check that out if you want. But other than that, thanks for checking out the show. Have a good rest of the weekend. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. And I'll be back here again next week. Good luck on your lineups.